Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting and open discussion. Today is June 22nd, 2021. If you haven't filled out who you are in the attendee list yet, please do so. We got some status updates and then some discussion topics and, of course, contributor shoutouts. I have the first status update, so I'll just continue on here. So as we talked about, I think it was last week, we're revamping the community meetings. So we're going to have community meetings in the US time zone, and we'll have community meetings in Asia Pacific time zone, Beijing time specifically. So we had a poll out, and the poll showed two different times that worked for pretty much everyone that responded to the poll. So thank you everyone who responded. Super, super nice of you. And we have decided that we're going to do a community meeting early morning in Beijing, so 8 a.m. In Beijing, which will be 8 p.m. Eastern here in the US. So anyone who wants to join in from the US, feel free to do so. And anyone who wants to join in from Asia Pacific or the Beijing or Taiwan or wherever you are over there, feel free to join as well. So we're sending those out. We're going to start that schedule in July. So we'll have the first and third Tuesday is going to stay just like this. So we'll have it at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on Tuesdays, just as regular. So first and third. And then every second and fourth Tuesday, we'll move over to the Beijing time zone. So they would be on Tuesday evenings here in the US, Wednesday morning over in the Beijing time zone. So that's the schedule update. Any questions, comments? All right. Next up, we have Bridgette.
Hi, everyone. So for this week, I have been primarily focusing on getting the Velero 1.6.1 release ready. We spoke about it last week during last week's community meeting, just that there had been an issue discovered with performing restic backups and restores on Kubernetes 121. So we're working to try and get that out as soon as possible. The branch has been ready. All the changes have been merged into the release branch. I'm now just running some tests prior to creating the tag, so that will be out very soon. That's it for me.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Any questions, comments for Bridgette or on the 1.6.1 release? All right. Next up, Dave.
Yeah, so I'm still working on the upload progress monitoring, just working through some of the code there. I should have some preliminary PRs ready soon. And we've been doing some training with the folks in Beijing, and those continue on. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for me.
Cool. Any questions, comments for Dave? All right. Diving into discussion topics. Who has the first one?
That would be me.
Go for it.
Okay, so the problem that I'm working with is the in OpenShift cluster, but the pattern that I see is might be in any user application, not in any, but in any user can any application can have that pattern, which is the if you have an operator prop that's in that namespace, and that operator prop is listening to some CR, for example, and based on that CR, it will create deployment of prop, etc. Right? So that in specific to OpenShift, that could be, for example, the OADP operator would listen to Velero CR, and when we have when we make some change in the Velero CR, the OADP operator will, based on that change, and adjust the Velero deployment within the OADP operator namespace. So that is an example of how the pattern of operator, CR working in that context, right? So that looked very nice and so on and so forth. But when we go into the restore, right, in the restore context, as you see that if I happen to restore the operator port first, right? The operator port will receive the CR in that namespace, and it will, based on that, and do some operations like, change the deployment, delete the deployment, etc. Right? However, we are still in the restoring process at that time, and our Velero restore also doing restoring path, restoring deployment, whatever. So these kind of interaction between there seem to be like a two workflow running in parallel at that point, right? One operation is running by the operator who trying to do something with the deployment based on the CR. And another workflow that is the Velero is trying to restore all the deployment, all the paths that it has, right? So in the OpenShift context, the OpenShift look at some of the owner reference to decide whether to restore or not a certain entity. For example, if it see the pod belong to a deployment and the deployment belong to something else, then it will not even restore the pod, for example, right? However, that relationship, the backup vendor like us have to be aware explicitly. OpenShift, in the OpenShift case, the OpenShift does know all of that. However, if the user the user applications do have additional relationship like that OpenShift plugin doesn't aware, or our backup vendor isn't aware, then it will interact, it will affect the restore workflow that we have. So that is the problem I observed, and I want to bring out here. I don't know if I have any solution for it, but one of the things that I hope that we can achieve here is that when I bring out this topic, maybe we can come up with some kind of convention to how to do that. So if the application happen to have that kind of an operator CR, pattern, hopefully that they follow some pattern, so the backup vendor like me would be able to come up with some generic code that able to adapt to that kind of workflow. So that is the issue that I want to bring here. So I want to listen to your opinion now.
It's certainly one of the issues we've been looking at. So we're hitting this in a couple different areas. One is things that don't need to be backed up except for the Kubernetes resources. So like, I think the example you're talking about right now, the Velero doesn't need to back up anything except the resources themselves. But then we get into these race conditions on restore. And then we also have things like data services that are operator driven. And we'd like to be able to expose not just the backup and restore the resource, but also doing application specific backup and restore. So for example, like with Postgres, we might want to back it up using write-ahead log shipping rather than volume snapshots. So we're trying to bring some of that together. And we're probably going to have different solutions. One model is for the operators themselves to start exposing out like snapshot APIs and data extraction APIs. And I've been kind of pushing that along with the Astrolabe stuff. Not everybody may do that. So we may need to come up with other things like, you could imagine having, people can write backup item action plugins as it is that would handle some of this. But the difficulty is, as an end user, you're suddenly installing like a whole bunch of plugins. So we really want to move more towards like a self-discovery model where the backup application can look at the Kubernetes namespace and understand what to do. And, we have like pre and post backup execution hooks, pre and post service, maybe, I don't know. So there's definitely a lot to figure out here. We're working with some of it in our own management cluster right now. Is we have a procedure, for example, where we can pause the operators there's a flag you can set in the Kubernetes resource that says pause the management, pause Cappy from doing stuff. And then you can back up and restore. And during that state, the controllers are supposed to not try to reconcile. So we can wait until everything has been restored and then say, okay, now go into the reconcile loop and start dealing with it. The ordering is tricky because there's no, right now, a lot of it we're doing alphabetically. So, how do you order yourself properly in that model? So, yeah.
Yeah, I also look into that ordering, and I saw that currently in our Velero restore data path, we do have a way to specify the order of restore, but only for the type, not among the same type. So I think that I forgot exactly the name of that parameter that we specify, that there's an array that we can specify backup this type first and the other type and so on and so forth. But within that type itself, all the part or all the service, we don't have any specific. I have done an enhancement in the backup side in which that we can specify that order. I don't know if we should start doing the similar order sequence in the restore side. I don't know if that would solve this problem, because that would be a nice thing to have, right? If we can say that before restore the operator, restore this thing first, and then restore the operator. That way that we can kind of guarantee that if the operator doesn't come up, it will not interfere with other stuff, right? So that is one way, but I don't know if that would be like the solution for this problem. But that it would be something nice. We can enhance the restore sequence within the same restore type to do that. I'm just brainstorming here.
It gets trickier and trickier, I think. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to start saying, hey, here's how you prepare your operator or your application for backup, and have people, adopt a convention or APIs or something that we say, hey, you're compatible for backup. And this is something we could push through like DP working group. We'd probably do something with Kasten and Druva and say, this is a standard way to do it. Because the difficulty is, what we continually hit is, oh, Velero didn't do the right thing when it restored the application. And it's like, no, the application isn't set up to be restored. And we can't like keep patching, Velero for each new application that comes out. And somebody does something in a completely new and different way, and we say, oh, well, now we have to like rejuggle how everything works in order to handle that. So we really need to start publishing some conventions and guidelines.
Well, the application that we're talking about here is OpenShift, right? It's very popular nowadays, and Dylan is right here. So the one I was playing with the OpenShift, and one of the things that I play with is trying to because in OpenShift, right, there is an internal registry. And internal registry is actually running inside a namespace, and it have like a PVC. We can, I can create a PVC, and I put that PVC as the internal image, right? In internal image, and then we save the image there, and so on and so forth. If I want to back up that internal registry, migrate into a non-knowledge namespace, I simply back up that namespace. And I run into that problem that because the internal registry is actually monitored by an operator, and it's run and stuff like that. So when I'm restoring it, things start to URL graph, right?
Yeah, let me jump in there. So there's a couple of things going on, and some of them are very specific to OpenShift, some of them aren't. The one that's not specific to OpenShift here is really the operator-based backup restore. We've hit this problem before in pure Kubernetes as well, right? Like you guys were talking about Postgres before, and a perfect example is like the crunchy Postgres operator. If you restore an operator-based application like CrunchyDB, you will out of the box run into problems, especially if depending on your storage provider, because we restore all the pods, then the operator goes and creates a new pod, and they both bound to the same PVC. So how we've solved this with our plugin, it's not really solved. It's more of like a temporary workaround, and there's still a lot of bugs with it. Is, well, if a pod has an owner reference, since operator-based resources always get to play with owner refs, we'll skip the restore. If you're using like Rustic, that will probably break things, because then the annotations for Rustic are kind of on the wrong resource, right? But you're talking about internal images for OpenShift. I think there's probably a way you can get around this without dealing with the operator problem. And this is a very OpenShift specific conversation, so I'm happy to take this elsewhere if we need to. But we actually, when we talk about backing up the internal images in OpenShift, we do not typically tell people to back up the registry namespace itself. What we instead do is we have a plugin for the image stream resource. And every time you back up a namespace which contains image streams, if that image stream references an internal image, we essentially stand up a transient Docker registry that's backed by the S3 storage. So whatever the BSL storage is using, we create a registry with environment variables that point to that same storage provider. And then we essentially just like Docker pull, Docker push the image into the S3 bucket in its own folder. And then at restore time, we can pull from the S3 bucket and restore the image. That is like kind of a pretty involved workaround. You have to be using the ODP operator for that to work, because it's a lot of like setup for it. But yeah, I don't see a good path forward with operator-based workloads today. So that's just my opinion on like a temporary workaround if you wanted to kind of solve this differently. But
yeah, I'm aware of that data path of going of back up the image streams going to S3. I think we've been working together on that one. And this is another experiment that I have, and trying to see if we can find another way to backing up it without going to the S3. Right? For example, if a customer they want exclusively using our system without going to S3, then we able to supply them with a solution. But of course, I'm hitting this one.
It's an interesting problem. I don't have a good answer for it yet, but it's something that we're very interested in solving ourselves. We have a lot of customers that are hitting this. So, and
and we're going to keep on hitting this. And there's certain configurations that probably can't be restored. We had one person come to us. They had stood up an NFS server inside their cluster, and then made that a PV provider. And then they had PVs that were in the NFS server. So they backed it all up just fine. But when it came time to restore, the NFS server didn't come up first. And we're trying to allocate PVs, which have storage classes that pointed to the NFS server, and they were just stuck.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it sounds to me, let me try to summarize what I'm hearing so far. So it sounds to me like there's a few ways to get around this one. This number one is, it seems like if an application have a pre-hook and post-hook, we can just say in the pre-hook, we pause the operation for during the restore. And after the restore complete, we unpause the operator so that it continue to work, and so that it will not interfere with our restore workflow status, right? So that's kind of one idea. The other idea that I also heard is the idea of putting the restore in a specific order. For example, if we can restore the operator last, the other thing will restore first, and then the operator will restore last, and it will not interfere with the restoring of the other stuff going on. And the third idea that's specific to the image registry would be going to the Amazon S3 service to backing up the image stream separately, so it would not interfere. But that one is like specific for that application, that one application, right? So thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions, comments around this? Okay. Let's move on to the next discussion topic, which is Bridgette.
Yeah, so Carlisi had asked about this on our development channel on Slack, just asking if anyone was working on the upgrade task to upgrade the Velero CRDs to use V1 APIs. I took a look again at the release schedule for 122, which is when the V1 beta 1 version of the CRD API, which we're currently using, will be removed from Kubernetes. And that is going to be taking place at some point in August, which means that I feel like this is something that we should be prioritizing and trying to get out quite soon. But I know that like in the initial, in the issue that we have tracking it, Nolan had mentioned that we might be able to leverage Carville to use this, and I don't know if that's going to be something that we can make use of in this time. So I just want to make sure that like we're aware of it and prioritizing it. I don't really know what the strategy should be for fixing this, because this is my first time kind of like working with something where you're having to like manage potentially 2 versions of the Kubernetes APIs. So I just wanted to bring it up to see if anyone else had any input on this, or yeah, I guess to maybe just like make sure that we're like aware of it, so we don't get bitten by it in like a month and a half. Especially since we just had another issue that came up on Kubernetes 121, I'm keen to not have another blocking issue at release time.
Yeah, it sounds like we need to go off and think this through. I thought one of the issues for upgrading the CRDs might be breaking compatibility with older Kubernetes.
Yes. Yeah, so if we upgrade, then we're essentially locked to being able to, we can only run on Kubernetes, I think 116 and later. So that was whenever the deprecation, that's whenever the V1 API was introduced. So we need, I don't know whether it's possible to have something where you can, at install time, look at what API is available in the Kubernetes server that you're installing into, and then pick based on that. But I don't know like what impact that would have further down the chain in the rest of the Velero code base. So yeah, like I said, this is not something I have a huge amount of experience with. I know we have like Frankie on the call here who's done a lot of work looking at the different like API versions and restoring between them. Yes. Sorry, I brought it up just because I panicked slightly before this call.
So part of the question is, if we, for example, simply moved Velero support to 1.16 for 162 plus, you know, what impact does that have? So I think what I've heard in the past is that the Red Hat stuff is doing upgrades using Velero. So is that gonna impact Conveyor?
Yeah, so my understanding, I know Scott has mentioned it in the past that like they currently have a workaround because Velero, the current version of Velero has it's no longer compatible with Kubernetes 111 and earlier, and I know that they have a workaround to make it work with versions of Kubernetes earlier than 112, so 111 and earlier. So I think this is going to be an even bigger impact if we move to just using V1.
I think this ties back to discussions we've had before as well. Yeah. You both mentioned it, like where do we stop? Like,
yeah,
is 116 the earliest one that we would support? We don't have any statements like that, and I think it would be good to put that into writing for sure. This could be a forcing function for that.
Yeah, maybe it's something we should put out in the community mailing list and just ask for input, because I think the solution of simply upgrading to the V1 APIs is, like a week's worth of work, not even, right?
Yeah.
But coming up with a solution that supports both sets of APIs, that is potentially a lot. And that may even be something where we do this in 1.6.1 and we say, there are 1.6.2, and we could say that, if there is demand for supporting older versions, then we say, okay, don't use 1.6.2. There's very little in it that's going to affect you anyway. And in 1.7, we come up with a better solution. It's a possibility too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so would this be something that we would consider backporting to earlier versions as well? Or is it going to be the case that if you want to run Kubernetes 122, you have to be using Velero 1.6.2?
I would go with that route because, there's other issues, I think, that we're running into. So if you want to be on the latest version of Kubernetes, I don't see why you wouldn't want to be on the latest version of Velero, given that we have backward compatibility for restores.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So maybe Bridgette just send a note out to the mailing list, or Eleanor, maybe it's better for Eleanor to do. Just send a note out to the mailing list asking, hey, we're looking at upgrading CRDs, and we're looking at moving Velero support for Kubernetes forward to 1.16, and looking for feedback on will this impact people?
Sounds good. Bridgette, I might pair with you to get the exact text right, but I am happy to send out that email. Thank you.
I was just about to volunteer some time there, just in case you wanted to pair on it. So that's absolutely fine with me.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for the input, everyone. Yeah, no, it's just, yes, it had been asked in the Slack channel, and I realized it wasn't something that we were actively working on right now, and it's coming up pretty quickly. So I'd like to be ahead of it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this up, Bridgette.
No problem.
All right. Do we have any other discussion topics? Anything else anyone would like to discuss on today's call? All right. Then we're going to dive into contributor shoutouts. Does anyone want to drive this with me?
I can do that.
Okay, awesome. I'm up here. So
I think some of these might have been included in last week's, but we'll go through. Yeah, so this fix is, I believe, from I think it was Pankaj Patil, who we had an issue on the website where the RSS link at the bottom in the footer of the website wasn't always going to the right location. So he had fixed the prefix in our website config so that link is now fixed and works. So thank you very much. And yeah, then this one is from Daniel Jiang, who is one of our new contributors based in the Beijing team here at VMware. So this was an issue with the website where the latest release information page or link on the front of the website was not updated to go to the latest release. So that was something that we missed during the 1.6 release cycle. So thank you very much, Daniel, for fixing that. And then this is one we covered this last week, but thanks again, Ali. This will be going out in the 1.6.1 release. As well, this change from Scott, which was fixing an issue where with the ordering of the CRDs and CRs upon restore. So this fix makes sure that we have the CRDs restored into the clusters that we can perform custom resource validation whenever they're being restored. So this was a regression from in 1.6 and will be included as well in the 1.6.1 release. Thanks, Scott.
Awesome. Thank you. And lastly, I want to give a big shout out to Abby. Abby is heading out on maternity leave next week. So she will be out of the community meetings and out of the Velero project for a few months. So I just want to give a big shout out to Abby for her hard work on all the technical documentation and the website and everything for Velero here. So thank you, Abby.
Thank you very much, Abby.
And have a good few months. It'll be great.
Right. So with that, thank you everyone for joining. Have a fantastic rest of the week, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.